You've seen the movie version. But the real Dahomey warriors were far more disciplined, feared, and dangerous than Hollywood showed you. In the kingdom of Dahomey, and what we now call Benin, there existed one of the most extraordinary military forces in world history, the Agojie, an all-female army that utterly shocked the European powers they encountered. These weren't just symbolic guards or a ceremonial unit. They were elite soldiers, frontline combatants, trained from a young age for the brutal realities of war. So, who were these women really? They were known as the Agojie, or sometimes the Dahomey Amazons by Europeans. When a woman was recruited, often as a young girl, she essentially renounced a traditional life. She would not marry, she would not have children, and her former family ties were severed. She became a wife of the king, but this was a title of status, not a marital relationship in the way we understand it. Her life was now dedicated solely to the state, to her fellow soldiers, and to the king. This absolute loyalty made them an incredibly cohesive and formidable unit, completely focused on their military duties. They were an official branch of the army, and their numbers could reach up to 6,000 soldiers, making them a significant portion of Dahomey's total military strength. This wasn't a small, niche group. They were a core pillar of the kingdom's power. Their training was notoriously brutal, designed to forge them into instruments of war. They underwent intense physical conditioning, including endurance drills that would break most people. One infamous test involved storming a barrier of acacia thorns barefoot, a trial meant to teach them to ignore pain. They mastered a variety of weapons, from traditional machetes and spears to muskets and, later, modern firearms like Winchester rifles. Hand-to-hand combat was a crucial skill, and they were trained to be merciless and efficient killers. But perhaps most importantly, they went through intense psychological conditioning. This wasn't just about physical toughness, it was about creating a mindset of absolute fearlessness. On the battlefield, the Agojie were a terrifying force. They weren't just defenders, they were often the vanguard, leading the most dangerous assaults. Their primary roles included raiding neighboring territories, capturing people for the slave trade which funded the kingdom, and defending Dahomey from rival African states and, eventually, European colonial armies. They were known for their shock tactics and their incredible speed and ferocity in an attack. Imagine seeing a wave of highly disciplined soldiers charging your position, screaming war cries, and showing no hesitation. That was the reality for anyone who faced them. They fought with a mix of traditional and modern weapons, adapting as new technology became available. Their skill with muskets and rifles made them particularly dangerous, challenging the European assumption of technological superiority. The Agojie were instrumental in making Dahomey one of the most powerful military states in West Africa for over 2 centuries. So, why did European powers fear them so much? It went beyond just their fighting skill. The very existence of the Agojie disrupted the Europeans' entire worldview and their battle plans. French officers who fought against them in the late 19th century wrote with a mixture of awe and terror, describing them as extraordinarily brave and disciplined. They were not seen as a novelty, they were seen as a serious military threat. The French expected to fight men, and their tactics were based on that assumption. The presence of an elite female army on the front lines was psychologically disorienting. These women fought with a ferocity that often surpassed that of their male counterparts, and they refused to retreat even when facing overwhelming odds. This defiance and sheer competence from a group that European society deemed the weaker sex was something the colonial officers couldn't easily process, and it made the Agojie legendary and feared. Their reputation often preceded them, striking fear into their enemies before a single shot was even fired. Now, let's talk about the Hollywood version versus the historical reality. While movies like The Woman King brought the Agojie into the global spotlight, they understandably took creative liberties. The film portrayed them as rebels and freedom fighters in a modern sense, fighting against the slave trade. The historical reality is far more complex and, in many ways, more challenging to our modern sensibilities. The Agojie were not rebels, they were the state. They were professional soldiers utterly loyal to a monarchical system. And a significant part of their military function, for a large portion of their history, was to conduct raids to capture people who were then sold into the transatlantic slave trade. This is a difficult truth to reconcile, but it's crucial to understanding them accurately. They were not fighting for freedom in the way we think of it today. They were fighting for the power, security, and expansion of the Kingdom of Dahomey. During the First and Second Franco-Dahomeyan Wars in the 1890s, the Agojie fought with incredible courage. They were on the front lines, leading charges against French positions armed with machine guns and modern artillery. But the technological gap was simply too wide to overcome. After the French conquered Dahomey and exiled the king, the Agojie unit was disbanded. Their last stand was a tragic but heroic chapter in the history of anti-colonial resistance, though they lost. Their fierce resistance delayed the French colonization of Dahomey and forced the European powers to recognize the kingdom as a serious military opponent. Not just another territory to be easily absorbed, the legacy of the Agojie is profound and multifaceted. They stand as one of the clearest and most well-documented examples of female warriors in world history, shattering the myth that warfare has always been an exclusively male domain. They prove that women have held positions of immense power and military importance throughout history. More than that, they represent a powerful example of African military sophistication and organization at a time when colonial narratives were trying to portray the continent as primitive and chaotic. The Kingdom of Dahomey had a complex social structure, a centralized government, and a highly professional army with the Agojie at its core. Their story forces us to look beyond simplistic narratives and to appreciate the rich and complex tapestry of African history. The Agojie were not simply Amazons or a historical curiosity, they were a vital institution that shaped the destiny of a nation for centuries. Their story is a powerful reminder of the strength, discipline, and courage that can be found in the most unexpected places. If this history surprised you, and you want to uncover more of the real stories that have been left out of our textbooks, then make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. African history is deeper, sharper, and far more powerful than you were ever taught. Thanks for watching.